Note that only certain users are allowed to import data into a Sumac database. If you are going to import data, your Sumac administrator must give you the bulk edit and import capability in your user profile. You may have donation data in different places, spreadsheets, or perhaps other databases. You want to gather it all together in your Sumac database. Perhaps you just held an event. At that event, attendees made donations, which you recorded in a spreadsheet, and after the event, you want to import those donations into your Sumac database. Before importing your spreadsheet, you should clean up the data. Use Sumac's Import Workspace to do this. Click Import Workspace. Select the file and click OK. First, specify the number of header rows in your spreadsheet so that Sumac does not mistake column headers for actual data. This spreadsheet has one header row. In the File Management area, under Header Rows, select 1. Notice that Sumac grayed out the header row to indicate that this row holds column titles. The donor contact is a mandatory field in donation records, so you must have a donor contact for each donation. You need to use data in the incoming file to identify the donor. If the donor is not already in the database, you need to add them. You can do this by selecting columns that hold contact data. In this spreadsheet, the contact first and last name columns hold the contact information. So select those two columns, then click Get Contact IDs. Sumac asks you to identify what information is in the two selected columns. In this example, it is the donor's first and last names. But note that you could use many other contact fields to identify these contacts. For example, their street address, birth date, or email address. Click OK, and Sumac looks in the database to find contacts with the specified first and last names. Then creates a new column to hold the contact IDs for the donors that are already in your database. Records that have problems are selected. Click to show only selected records. There are two possible problems. Either the contact is not in the database, in which case there will be no contact ID. Alternatively, the columns being used to identify the contacts, in this example the first and last names, do not uniquely identify a contact, and there are two or more contact IDs showing. First, let's deal with the contacts that are not in the database. If there are many of them, you could save this file and import new contacts into the database. Since there is only one, we can quickly add them to the database and enter their IDs in the file. Ambiguously defined contacts can only be resolved if you know which of the two contact IDs to use. Let's say that we know which of the two James Smiths in our database actually made the donation, so we can delete the incorrect ID. Show all rows, and we now have a single donor contact ID for every donation. Just to be sure, it is a good idea to click the contact ID column and validate them. Continue validating other columns, like currency amount and date fields, to ensure that all the data in this spreadsheet is valid. That reduces the chance of errors when importing these donations. Although the spreadsheet contained only one column for the amount, Sumac donation records contain fields for both a total amount and a receivable amount. Often these are the same amounts, so click to select the amount column and duplicate it. Save the work you've done in Import Workspace. Notice that Sumac proposes a revised file name. Each time Import Workspace saves a file, It increments the file version number. Now that you've imported the new contacts and cleaned your spreadsheet, click Utilities, Import, and Import. Indicate that you are importing donations. Choose the data file and click OK. The data appears on the right-hand side. You must tell Sumac which donation fields correspond to which column of data. First, identify the contacts in the incoming donation records. Contact names may be ambiguous, but you used Import Workspace to find contact IDs for all the donors, so you can identify the contacts using their IDs. Select the ID column and specify that this column contains the donor's contact ID. The left-hand side of the window holds a list of all the fields in donation records. Match field names to data columns by dragging field names and dropping them onto the data columns. Some donation information may not actually be in the file. For example, you know that these donations came from a particular event, but the event is not in a column in the file. You can specify the event by clicking beside the event field on the left-hand side, then choosing the event. This specifies the event that will be used in every donation being imported. Once all the donation columns have been matched, you must validate the data before you can import it. Click Validate to tell Sumac to check all the data. Sumac checks every row in every column to make sure that the data is correct. If something is wrong, perhaps a date or amount that is incorrectly formatted, then Sumac highlights the incorrect cell and puts an error message at the start of the row. At this point, you may choose to stop the import, fix up the original file, and try again. Before you do this, you should save column choices to save the list of column selections. Later, when you import again, you can save some time by clicking the Load Column Choices button. Alternatively, if there appears to be something wrong with an entire column, you can click to select that column, then click Clear Column Title to tell Sumac not to import that column. Alternatively, you can click to just ignore this single row of data in the incoming file. Then click Import. All the donation records are imported into Sumac. They turn from black to green to indicate successful importing. If you now look at the donations list and search for donations from your event, you can see that the newly imported donations have been added to your database. Check out more training videos to learn more about Sumac.